Salutations, everypup, and welcome to Chapter 51 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. I got this notification 15 minutes ago, and it is currently 5:27 in the morning. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 51, The Newest Family Member. Chapter Summary. Eri wakes up and joins the family. But just in what shape and form will she join? And how will she fit in their already messy dynamic? Author's notes. Well, hello everyone, and happy 1st of May. So, things have happened IRL, and I'm now on sick leave for the whole summer. I'm fine, just mental health stuff. I'm gonna take this time to recover and get some writing done. But that being said, please be kind and understanding of any errors or if the quality of this chapter isn't as good as they used to be. I'm trying my best. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this new chapter. Trigger warning. Crying, small moment of panic, mentions of Aries' past, switching, multiple personalities. P.S. This story now has a podfic. Please check it out and show the creators some love, since they are amazing and deserve it. There's a link to the playlist that this video will be on. Seriously, this podfic got me back into writing and really helped keep me motivated. Thank you to PuppyWanter502 for making it and for being awesome. Now that I have been forced to say kind words about myself, let's get on into the chapter. Shota's point of view. She's awake! All three immediately tensed at those words, and Shota, who was the first to act, was quick to stand up and hurry to the door. "We'll talk more later," the man said urgently, before rushing out into the hallway. He noticed the sound of footsteps following him, and he looked back to see Izuku still in his hybrid form, chasing him down the empty halls. "Kid, go wait in your room with Toshinori," Shota told him sternly, glaring back at the kid over his shoulder. Izuku, the problem child that he was, just shook his head and kept following him stubbornly. The evening sun was shining in through the windows as they ran through the hallway, the shine just as fierce as Izuku's glare. "No! I want to know how Eri is doing," the kid said, voice challenging as he kept running after him. The man sighed. He really didn't have the time, nor energy to argue about this right now. "We have no idea what kind of state she's in," Shota warned, slowing down when he reached their destination. He could hear voices from the other side of the door. "Even more reason for me to be there," Izuku said, determination in his voice and a fire in his eyes as he came to a stop next to Shota. At that, Shota raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how so?" he asked, wondering what Izuku was getting at. "I'm a licensed therapy animal, remember?" Izuku pointed out, his tail flicking behind him. "My smaller form is great at calming distressed kids," he added with a cheeky smile. Shota sighed. He couldn't argue with that logic. "Fine, but we're not sure you can actually meet her. We need the doctors to approve first," he said before knocking on the door. They waited for permission to enter, before they passed through the door and into the room that was leading into Aries. It was a small, empty room without any furniture, and it was filled to the brim with doctors and nurses, all watching Eri anxiously through the one-way window. And sure enough, Eri was indeed awake, though she wasn't moving. She was sitting up in her bed, clutching the blankets tightly as she trembled, unseeing eyes staring straight ahead. "We went to get you as soon as she woke up. No one has tried to approach her, in case her quirk goes haywire," one of the doctors explained, approaching Shota with a deep frown on their face. Shota nodded solemnly, eyes never leaving the trembling child on the other side of the glass. "Good. We don't want to stress her out even more," Shota said, approvingly. The last thing they needed was a quirk accident where someone got erased from existence. In the corner of his eye, Shota noticed Izuku walking closer to the one-way glass separating them from Eri, a worried frown on his face. His ears were laying flat against his head as he watched her, his tail flicking anxiously behind him from the stress. Can I meet her? The boy asked, turning away from the window and instead looking at Shota with big, pleading eyes. He considered it, looking between the two kids, before nodding his approval. Hold on, I don't really think that's a good idea. One of the doctors tried to argue, but Shota cut them off. Midoriya Izuku is a licensed therapy animal, he said, cringing a little at calling his student a mere animal. He is used to dealing with children in distress, and I trust him to handle this with care. Besides, Shota trailed off, turning to look at Izuku, who was watching him with a starstruck expression as if he couldn't believe he was being praised. Eri knows him, Shota continued. He was there when she was rescued, and it might help to have someone she knows and trusts there when we go in and talk to her, he said matter-of-factly, his voice carrying a finality that few would dare to argue. The doctors still seemed unconvinced, some of them looking at Izuku doubtfully, but eventually they all agreed on letting him accompany them inside. With all that being said, Shota, Izuku, and one of the doctors entered through the heavily locked door. Shota cringed at the sound of the lock. Sure, he knew why it was necessary to keep her contained in such a manner, but it still felt a tad extreme to lock up a kid. Eri tensed at their arrival and turned to face them, trembling like a leaf as she did. Wide, untrusting eyes turned to meet Shota's own, the girl looking so scared as she shook on the bed. Then her horns suddenly started to light up from her fear, and Shota wasted no time in using his quirk to erase Eri's own. As soon as he did, the girl gasped, flinching back as if she had been struck before reaching up a trembling hand to her horn with a wide-eyed expression, as if she couldn't believe it had been stopped. Mr. Aizawa here can temporarily erase quirks, the doctor explained gently. He will be joining us here today to make sure there are no accidents. Is that all right with you, Eri? You... you stopped my curse, Eri spoke up softly, tears gathering in her eyes as she stared at Shota. The man nodded, still using his quirk. It was weird, the way she was looking at him. Usually, Shota would be met with fear or disgust when he used his quirk on someone. But not this girl. No. Instead, she looked relieved. And she called her quirk a curse? What was that about? There was some shuffling behind him, and it shouldn't have come as a surprise when Izuku peeked out from a spot behind Shota, having seemingly grown impatient. The two kids spotted each other, and, just as Shota had suspected, as soon as Aries as soon as Eri locked eyes on Izuku, recognition shined in her eyes. Hey, Eri, remember me? Izuku asked gently, taking a few steps forward while keeping his posture as small and unthreatening as possible. The little girl gasped before nodding her head eagerly and reaching out for her hero. Izuku wasted no time in closing the gap between them, sitting down on the bed so he could tug the kid close and pull her into his lap. By this point, both kids were crying as they hugged each other, and when Shota felt Eri's quirk calm down, he silently released his own quirk, letting out a sigh of relief when Eri didn't so much as flinch, too busy crying and clinging to Izuku. The doctor and Shota politely stayed quiet and let them cry, leaving the comforting to the boy. Though he had to say, crying was an interesting comforting tactic. When the two finally calmed down, both having tears and snot running down their faces as they sniffled, Shota politely handed them some tissues. Izuku looked embarrassed eyes as he took them, before wiping his face and then helping Eri wipe her own with careful hands and a gentle smile. The whole sight was so adorable that Shota felt himself smile softly, tucking his head into his capture weapon to hide it. So, Eri, could I show you something? Izuku asked softly, earning a tilt of his head from the girl. Yes? Eri answered quietly, looking a bit confused by the question. She probably wasn't used to people asking if she was okay with things, Shota realized. She was probably used to just having to go along with whatever the villains had wanted to do to the poor girl. At the okay, Izuku gave her a huge smile before moving her off his lap and disappearing in a cloud of smoke. In his place was now an adorable green kitten who meowed up at her. Eri gasped, hands coming up to her mouth and her eyes huge as she looked down at the cat. She wasn't exactly smiling, and she still looked confused, but her eyes were shining with curiosity and wonder as she stared at the fluffy being down in front of her. Shota wondered if this was her first time seeing a cat, or any kind of animal for that matter. It would definitely explain the look she was giving Izuku right now. Izuku has a quirk that lets him turn into a cat, Shota explained gently, as he kneeled down next to the bed and ran a hand down Broccoli's back, earning him a purr. He said it's great for calming people down and that you are free to pet him. Just be gentle. He's very small. Broccoli nodded at Shota's explanation, letting out an adorable meow as he took a step closer to Eri. He then bumped one of her hands with his head, meowing again as if encouraging her to pet him. Eri twitched at that, her whole body flinching, before she seemed to calm herself down, and she gently, ever so gently, started petting Broccoli. The cat then crawled closer, before laying down in her lap and purred loudly. The little girl kept staring down at him in awe, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. The little girl kept staring down at him in awe, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. He's so cute, she whispered, eyes shining as she continued to pet him, her every move turning more and more confident the longer she did this, clumsy hands doing their best to stroke along Broccoli's back. Yes, he is, Shota agreed with a grin, eyes flicking down to where Broccoli was laying in her lap. He also loves being called Broccoli, he added teasingly, earning him a glare from the cat. The glare quickly disappeared, though, when, in the sweetest voice imaginable, Eri whispered out a "Broccoli, I like it." Shota's heart all but melted at that, and judging from the way Broccoli let out a deep purr, he would guess he felt similarly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have some tests we need to run, just to make sure you are healthy, the doctor spoke up gently, and as soon as they noticed Eri's terrified expression, they continued. Feel free to hold on to, broccoli while we examine you, if you'd like. I promise this won't be painful at all, and if you ever need a break, just let us know. You promise it won't hurt? The girl asked quietly, looking ready to cry as she stopped petting Broccoli. The cat immediately sat up and put his paw against her small shoulders, meowing and bumping his head against her chin. I promise, the doctor said softly, giving her a gentle smile. And I can still hold on to Broccoli? Eri asked, shakingly, moving to hug the cat to her chest. Broccoli simply let her hug him, hanging limply as he purred. Of course, the doctor promised with a gentle smile. Okay, Eri hesitantly agreed, still looking scared as she held on to the purring cat. With her permission, the doctor began their exam, and just as he promised, it wasn't painful. Eri looked shocked when the doctor announced they were done, as if she had expected something much, much worse. There we go. That's all we needed for now. Aside from a few cuts and bruises, I'd say you are healthy enough, the doctor exclaimed as they stepped back, clipboard filled with all sorts of notes in hand. That's it? Eri asked, blinking up at him in surprise. That's it, the doctor echoed, before reaching into their pocket. Here, have a lollipop, they said cheerfully, as they handed her a brightly colored lollipop. Eri took it, looking utterly lost and confused as she did. It's something you eat, Shota explained gently. He wasn't surprised to learn she apparently didn't know what candy was, considering her upbringing. Hesitantly, Eri put the lollipop in her mouth, only to grimace and pull it out, staring down at it in confused betrayal. Shota tried really, really hard not to laugh at that. and instead he schooled his expression and gently reached out for the lollipop, removed the wrapper before handing it back to the kid. Here, try now, he said softly, still trying very hard not to laugh. Eri did try eating it again, and this time her eyes lit up at the taste. She still wasn't smiling, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. Both the doctor and Shota smiled at that, before the doctor got up and left the room, letting them know they would be back for more tests later and for Eri to rest for now. Shota and Broccoli stayed with Eri for a while, until the girl eventually tired herself out and fell asleep, still hugging Broccoli closely as if she was a plushie. As if he was a plushie. You need help? Shota asked, feeling amused as he saw his cat struggling to get out of her tight grip. Broccoli tried, shuffling out for another moment before letting out a sigh of defeat and nodding up at Shota. The man chuckled before grabbing a pillow and very gently lifted Eri's arm, letting Broccoli out of the human-shaped prison, and instead replacing him with the pillow. Eri barely stirred, and Shota let out a sigh of relief as he stood back. Beside him, Broccoli was furiously grooming himself. You did good, kiddo, Shota told him softly, causing Broccoli to startle and look up at him in surprise. Then, with a poof of smoke, Izuku was back to his hybrid form, blushing a bright red as he avoided looking at Shota. It was nothing, the kid mumbled, clearly embarrassed over the whole thing. It wasn't nothing, Shota argued softly, being mindful of the sleeping child next to them. What you did really helped Eri. I'm proud of you. At that, Izuku's eyes widened, and he looked up at Shota in surprise before he started tearing up. Oh no, Shota thought, suppressing a groan as he realized Izuku was about to cry. Again! Thanks, Dad, Izuku said softly, wiping away his tears as they started to fall. He was smiling, though, so Shota assumed these were happy tears. With a sigh, Shota opened his arms, and Izuku wasted no time in hugging him as he started to cry for real. Seriously, how could someone cry this much? After that, Broccoli became a sort of comfort animal for Eri during her time at the hospital. Him and Shota would stay in their own room, right next to Eri's, and they would be there with her whenever the doctors needed to run some tests. Toshinori would visit them daily, and Shota heard Izuku talk with some of his classmates over the phone, all of them understandably worried about him being gone for so long. He couldn't wait for them all to be going back to UA. Speaking of UA, Toshinori, the impulsive fool, had already started redecorating their office, all in preparation for Eri to move in with them. It didn't matter how much Shota tried to explain they couldn't just call dibs on every hurt child they stumbled upon. The man was determined. And so, with his husband's wishes in mind, Shota had ventured over to the hospital staff room and asked to borrow their printer. Once he got the okay, he printed out the correct forms for adoption. And, after a bit of contemplation, he printed out another one. After all, they still needed one for Izuku. They might as well do it all at the same time. He then headed over to the little girl's room, knowing both her and Izuku were already there. The girl had gotten a lot more stable lately, which is why Shota felt safe in leaving the two of them together without his supervision. He trusted Izuku to keep her calm. On his way there, he stumbled upon Nezu, who was walking in the opposite direction. The mammal was happily humming to himself, tail wagging as he held a set of papers in front of him and headed towards Aries' room. They both stopped outside the door and looked at each other, and for a long moment, neither of them said a word. But then, his boss grinned up at him and, without warning, the small mammal had climbed Shota and seated himself on his shoulder. Aizawa! What a pleasant surprise! Nezu chirped happily, voice high-pitched and hurting his ear terribly when it was this close to him. Nezu, Shota greeted back, noticing the way his father figure / old mentor was eyeing the forms in his hands. So that's why he climbed up on my shoulder, Shota thought with a barely repressed sigh. Of course the rat would want to snoop.
I see you finally got the forms ready to adopt little Izuku,
Nezu said with an approved hum.
Although that is an awful lot of papers for just one pup. Anything you wish to tell me?
We have also decided to take in Eri as well. Shota answered honestly, seeing no reason to lie.
Oh, I see,
Nezu replied, voice and smile a little bit strained, for some reason.
And have you spoken to Izuku about that?
No, not yet, Shota answered with a shake of his head. I was just about to talk to them both.
I see,
Nezu hummed, kicking his feet a little from where he still sat on Shota's shoulder.
I don't believe that would be necessary, though, seeing as Eri already has a potential guardian.
Shota's eyes widened at that, and he turned to look at his boss in surprise. The mammal was looking awfully cheerful as he smiled up at him. What, she has? She's only been here for a few days. Who could possibly... He trailed off, eyes flickering down to the papers in Nezu's paws and finally recognizing them for what they were. Wait, you can't be serious right now. You? Shota sputtered.
Why so surprised?
Nezu asked him cheerfully, looking like he found the whole thing amusing.
I have been talking about wanting a pup of my own, and seeing how little Izuku is off limits, I figured I could give this poor girl a safe home at UA.
Yes, but she'd get that with us, too. Shota tried to argue. She'd live in the 1A dorms with Toshinori, Izuku, and I, as well as the rest of 1A.
That is certainly an alternative,
Nezu hummed.
But it wouldn't exactly be a very stable environment for a traumatized child such as herself. After all, 1A can be a bit much. It would be better for her to stay in the teacher dorms with me, where she can have some peace and calmness around her.
Shota frowned down at the other, considering it. He hated to admit it, but the damn rat was right. As usual, but still. You think you can raise a human child? Shota asked hesitantly. He trusted Nezu with his life, but, well, the rat could be a bit insensitive, not to mention downright cruel.
I raised you, didn't I?
Nezu shot back with a grin. I was already 17 when you took me in. Eri is just a small child. There's a big difference. Shota groaned. Surely Nezu had to see that.
I know,
Nezu laughed, waving his free paw in front of him.
And don't worry, I wouldn't take her in if it wasn't something I wasn't sure I could handle. She will be safe with me, I promise.
Nezu, with all due respect, are you sure you can raise a human child? There are certain things she might need, especially emotionally.
Indeed, there are!
Nezu rudely cut him off with a sharp smile.
And that's precisely why I should be the one to take her, no? After all, you two have a lot of missed time to get back with Izuku, correct? It hardly seems fair to him to bring another child into the mix, just when he got his father's all to himself.
Izuku loves Eri. I'm sure he would be fine with it. Shota argued, though he was starting to grow unsure the more they spoke. Had they just assumed the kid would be fine with this? Maybe they should have actually talked to him before making such a big decision.
I'm sure he would be. After all, we both know how self-sacrificing he can be.
Nezu sighed, shaking his head sadly. At that, Shota grimaced. Right. This was Izuku they were talking about. Of course he would just smile and act fine, even if he didn't want something. With a sigh, Shota stepped towards the nearest garbage bin and threw one set of the forms away, much to Nezu's delight. Fine, you can take her. Shota sighed in defeat.
Thank you, Aizawa, for being so understanding. And don't worry, Eri will still be a big part of your lives, even if she lives with me. It is simply a formality.
With all that being said, Shota pocketed the adoption form for Izuku, figuring he should probably wait until they were back home with Toshinori before he brought it up with the kid. Speaking of Toshinori, he should probably give him a call and have him stop the redecorating in the office before he colored the walls pink or something. At the thought of his husband, Shota couldn't help but smile, and he let out a fond huff. He couldn't wait for them to get home today. Together with Nezu, Shota headed into Eri's room, the mammal still on Shota's shoulder. The little girl had met Nezu a few times before, and every time she seemed fascinated with him. She had looked like she wanted to pet him really bad the first time they met, and she had an easier time talking to him than any of the human adults. Seeing it like that, it probably was a good idea for Nezu to take her in, since he didn't trigger her trauma. And come to think of it, the mammal had similar trauma as her, so he would probably be able to help her in ways that Shota couldn't do. Fuck. It really was meant to be, wasn't it?
Hello, Izuku! Hello, Eri!
Nezu chirped as they stepped into the room, a smile on his face and his tail wagging in excitement. Izuku, who for once was in his human form, was sitting on the bed with Eri on his lap, a book in front of them as he seemed to have been reading to her out loud. And as soon as he saw them, he lit up with a bright smile. "Dad! Nezu! Hello!" he greeted them back, equally as cheerful as he gave them a big and excited wave. Shota paused at the sound of his voice. It sounded weird and awfully childish. Was the boy doing some kind of voice for a character in the book, and he forgot to change it back?
Ah, I see,
Nezu hummed, giving Izuku a knowing look that Shota had a hard time to understand. As if sensing his confusion, Nezu turned to look at Shota and spoke in a much more quiet voice.
Hound Dog has explained that sometimes Izuku's personality might change due to circumstances. Has he told you about his ongoing investigation?
No. No, he hasn't, Shota whispered back. What investigation? Had Shota again missed something important?
I suppose it makes sense. He probably wanted to wait until he was actually diagnosed.
Nezu hummed, a paw raised to his face in thought. Diagnosed? With what? Shota hissed, now really worried. Was the kid sick or something?
Dissociative identity disorder,
Nezu answered softly, making sure to keep his voice low so the two kids wouldn't hear.
Right now, I suspect he is one of his so-called little alters, meaning his personality is one more of a child.
Shota's head was spinning. He knew a little about DID, but he had no idea that Izuku had it. But thinking back, it made sense. What are you two whispering about? Izuku asked them, voice still sounding like that of a child and having a slight lisp. Shota looked over, only to find both kids staring at them, tilting their heads at them curiously.
Nothing you need to worry about,
Nezu chirped happily, before giving Izuku a thoughtful look.
I'm sorry, what should I call you?
At that, Izuku giggled, as if Nezu was being silly. I'm Izuku! You know that.
I see. No other name you prefer? Or gender, perhaps?
Nezu asked kindly. Izuku paused, looking surprised. I'm supposed to be Izuku, but my real name is Sakura, and I'm a girl. She said, voice less excited now and filled with worry as he looked at them nervously. Shota's eyes widened at that, and he could finally understand why Nezu had insisted on them not taking any more kids. If taking an Izuku meant they already had more than one.
Sakura!
Nezu repeated with a smile.
It is very nice to meet you.
I thought your name was Izuku, Eri asked, a confused smile on her face.
It is. Well, this body is named Izuku, because that's what everyone calls me. But I'm actually Sakura,
she said, with a small smile, sounding oddly relieved as she told Eri this, as if it was a burden taken off her shoulders. Eri looked awfully confused, and Nezu was quick to jump in to explain.
Sakura, would it be alright if I explained your condition to Eri?
Huh? What condition? Sakura asked, tilting her head curiously. You know, your multiple personalities? Shota added, trying to sound as calm as he could, despite the way his head was spinning and his heart was racing. How could they have missed this? Had Izuku changed personalities around them before and they never noticed? Or had the kid never felt safe enough to switch when they were around?
Ooh, right. That, Sakura said with a big smile on her face. Yeah, it's okay.
She added with a shrug, as if it wasn't a big deal. And so, he and Nezu sat down on the bed next to the two kids, as the mammal explained as gently as he could what DID was to the small child. He explained it like several people sharing a single body, each having their own name, age, and personality. Sometime during his speech, Shota noticed something inside of Sakura switch, and he paid close attention to the way Izuku's eyes widened slightly as they took in a sharp breath, before obviously doing their best to act cool and play it off as nothing. What happened? Shota asked them, uncaring that he had been interrupting Nezu. Huh? Oh, sorry, I must have zoned out. Izuku said tiredly, rubbing a hand against his temple.
Are you back to being Izuku?
Nezu asked curiously. What? Of course I'm Izuku. The boy answered with a huff, sounding confused by the question.
So you don't remember Sakura?
Nezu asked him gently. Who?
The one you were just speaking to. The one we were just speaking to. They said their name was Sakura,
Nezu said patiently, watching the kid with interest. Something like recognition lit up in the boy's eyes. That sounds familiar. I still don't remember, though. Sorry, Izuku answered, still rubbing a hand against his temple as if he had a headache.
No need to apologize,
Nezu chirped.
So you're back to being Izuku?
Eri asked him curiously. At that, Izuku grimaced. Shota could clearly see the fear in his eyes, as if he thought the girl would think he was weird or scared of him. Maybe that's why the boy hadn't told them yet? It made Shota sad, thinking of all the secrets Izuku felt like he had to keep from them, even after everything they've gone through. Seriously, compared to learning his student was their cat, this was hardly a big deal. After a moment of silence, the boy finally spoke up, looking afraid as he spoke. Yeah, I'm Izuku, he said softly, avoiding all of their eyes as he curled into himself.
Okay,
the girl said simply, before turning back to the book.
Would you like to keep reading, Izuku?
Izuku's eyes widened, and Shota had to try really hard not to laugh at his shell-shocked expression. You don't mind? Or think I'm weird? The boy stuttered out.
No, you already have two names, Izuku and Broccoli, so why would a third one matter?
Eri asked, tilting her head.
Besides, I like Sakura. She seems nice, just like you and Broccoli.
Shota noticed tears in his student's eyes, and he wordlessly handed him some tissues before they could fall. The boy took the tissues with a shaky smile, looking grateful. Thank you, Izuku said tearfully, though Shota was unsure who he was thanking. There was the sound of someone clearing their throat, and they all looked down at Nezu, who at some point during all of this had moved to sit on Shota's lap, mirroring Eri and Izuku's current position.
I do apologize, but there was actually a reason I showed up here today,
Izuku said with a smile, already pulling out the papers from his pocket. Oh, right. The adoption.
Eri, how would you like to move in with me and live as my adopted daughter on UA campus?
Nezu asked the girl gently, tail wagging and hitting Shota's chest. Both Eri and Izuku's eyes widened at that, and they stared at Nezu, before looking at each other and then staring right back at the mammal, shocked expressions on their small faces. Wait, really? I thought... Izuku trailed off, glancing over at Shota. Nezu really wants to keep her, Shota explained with a fond huff, shaking his head. Oh, was all Izuku said, his gaze turning to the ground. He looked a bit sad. Well, Eri spoke softly, gaining everyone's attention. Will I still get to see Izuku? Of course! Nezu chirped immediately, with no hesitation. In fact, you two will be neighbors and live only a few minutes away from each other. You can visit him whenever you like. At that, the girl looked awfully relieved, and she gave a hesitant nod. Okay, then yes, I I'd like that. But what happens now? She asked, carefully fiddling with the pages of the book in front of her as she looked at them with uncertain eyes. One of the doctors will soon look you over one last time, then you will be let out and we will travel back to UA together, the rat explained softly. After all that was said and done, they waited together for the doctor. Izuku had at some point picked up the book and started reading out loud to Eri, though he seemed to stay as Izuku this time. The sound of his voice was oddly soothing, and Shota felt so proud of him for taking such good care of what was essentially his little sister. Or, wait, if Shota was Nezu's pup, and Eri was Nezu's pup, and Izuku was Shota's, did that make Eri Izuku's aunt? Shota shook his head, deciding it wasn't worth getting a headache over. Besides, looking at them like this, one could probably call them cousins. Yeah, that seems about right, he thought with a fond smile. He was still a little bit disappointed over not being able to have Eri as his daughter, but she would still be family, and that was good enough for now. Besides, with Izuku and now Sakura in their lives, Shota supposed he already had a daughter, maybe even more than one. He really wanted to get to know all of them, and he couldn't wait for the day Izuku felt comfortable enough to share every part of himself with him. The doctor soon showed up, and Eri was discharged from the hospital. Together, they all headed towards Nezu's car, where the mammal immediately helped Eri into a kid seat in the back that was not there the last time Shota had looked. Once Eri was secured in her seat, Nezu got into the front together with Shota and started fiddling with the screen in front of him. Behind them, Shota could see Izuku and Eri talking, the small girl looking around the car in awe. Her awestruck expression only seemed to grow as the car started moving. Not that Shota could blame her. Although he wouldn't admit it, the self-driven car was pretty cool. They got back to UA and followed Nezu back to his apartment, using the excuse to help him with all the bags. But in reality, Shota was curious to see just what the living space for the little girl would look like. He really shouldn't have been surprised when he found out that Nezu had added a whole new room to his apartment, and the room was already fully furnished. It looked like a literal princess room, with light pink and purple colors and lots of toys. The bed looked like something right out of a picture book, with its high pillars and curtains falling off the ceiling and sides. Shota had to admit that he was impressed, and so was Eri, based on her awestruck expression. They soon left the two of them alone, figuring they would be fine on their own. Besides, they deserved some private bonding time. Together with Izuku, Shota headed over to Class 1A's dorm, and as soon as they walked through the door, they were bombarded by Shota's loud students. Midoriya! Sensei! You're back! Hello, Izuku said shakingly, hiding just a little bit behind Shota as he seemed overwhelmed by his classmates. And then there it was. The question. When were you gonna tell us you were Sensei's cat? Radaka all but shrieked. Both Shota and Izuku stiffened at that question, and he could feel Izuku clinging to his back. I, um, I was planning to tell you one day, Izuku mumbled, earning a scoff from both Shota and, surprisingly, Bakugo. Sure you were, Shota sighed, before glancing over at his apartment door. He was worried about Toshinori and still needed to tell him the news about Eri, since he had completely forgotten to call him earlier.
Well, come on. Tell us everything. How did you get to live with Aizawa and All Might Sensei?
And that's my cue to leave, Shota huffed, taking a step away from Izuku and ignoring his betrayed look. But what? No! Izuku protested, reaching out a trembling hand towards him. You made this bed yourself. Now lay in it, Shota told him firmly, but not unkindly, causing a few of his students to laugh at Izuku's crestfallen face. He watched as they led the kid over to one of the couches, and Izuku proceeded to tell them about the story of Broccoli. Shota shook his head fondly before heading towards his apartment. As soon as he entered, though, he almost immediately regretted it. The whole place was a goddamn mess. There were things and tools spread all across the floor. Furniture from the office had been carelessly moved to the living room, and worst of all, it smelled like paint. The stench giving him a headache already. With a groan, Shota headed towards the office, only to stop in the doorway at the scene he stumbled into. There was Toshi and Slushy, both covered in an awfully bright pink color that was hurting his eyes. Seriously, how did they manage that? There was more paint on them than there was on the actual walls! What happened? Shota asked with another groan, giving his husband a disapproving glare. I tried to paint Eri's new room. Shota was suddenly very happy that Nezu had decided to take in Eri. Seriously, what had Shota been thinking? Bringing a child into this mess? With a sigh, Shota picked up Slushy and gestured for Toshinori to follow him to the bathroom, where he proceeded to clean off the poor cat as he updated Toshinori on the whole Eri situation. The man was obviously upset over it all, but eventually accepted it with a sigh. After a bit of debating, Shota then told him about Izuku's multiple personalities, which led to a whole lecture about DID and what it was, since the man was unfamiliar with it. So, he has several personalities? Toshinori asked gently, looking unsure. Yes, so technically, we already have more than one kid, Shota huffed as he washed Slushy's fur and tried to get the paint out. The cat was just laying there, completely uncaring of her bath. Not at all like her little brother, who would hiss and fight them whenever water was involved. I see, Toshinori hummed thoughtfully. I suppose we need to step up and get to know him. I mean, them better then. You said one of them was a little girl. Should we, get her some toys? Or perhaps some children's books? The man rambled, looking more and more excited as he spoke. Shota let out an amused laugh at that. Of course his husband would be this accepting. Sure. Let's talk to him about what she might like. He then paused thoughtfully. We should probably turn the office back home into their own room, too, since he already has a dorm room but nowhere to stay during long breaks. Oh, I still have some paint left over. No painting the walls. Shota cut him off with an amused huff. At that, Toshinori wilted, before he agreed with a sigh and a fine. They continued to clean themselves up. Shota had managed to get most of the paint out of Slushy's fur, as well as Toshinori's hair, though there was now a slight pink tint to them both. Hopefully, the paint wouldn't cause Slushy to become sick. Now, as clean as they could be, they headed out into the living room and looked around the mess. Time to get cleaning. They could hear voices from the lounge outside, and Shota wondered how Izuku was holding up. He had kind of left him to the sharks out there. Hopefully the kid was doing okay. Author's notes. Nezu adopts Eri! Yay! I was thinking of having her move in with the Racer Mite, but it just felt better this way, with Izu being an only child and gaining an adorable little cousin. Aunt, instead. Don't look at Izuku's family tree, lol. It sure is getting messy. I wasn't sure whether to add Sakura or not, but since she is based on one of my own little alters, who has been helping me write this story, I figured she would make an appearance. Besides, Shota needed to learn about Izu having DID somehow. I might as well throw it in his face, lol. That being said, it was really hard to write that scene, since I mostly back out when she takes over. But hopefully I did an okay job. Some info about Sakura. She is around the same age as Eri, around 5 or 6 years old. She is very hyperactive and only shows up when she's feeling particularly safe and something is nostalgic. Hence why reading a children's book together with Eri triggered her to appear. She shares her memories with Izu and other alters, which is why she recognizes all of them, and even remembers putting marks on food packages, as if it was a fond memory. Call back to therapy with Hound Dog. She doesn't carry any trauma and is overall just a ray of sunshine. Talking about bad stuff will force another alter to take her place and shield her. Anyway, so that's one of Izuku's many alters. Please be kind to her, since she is based on one of my own littles, and I'm very protective of her. I know this chapter was very Shota-centric, and I promise we'll get more point of views next chapter. I actually had to cut this chapter in half because it was getting too long and thought the end of Shota's point of view was a good place to cut it. Next up, we'll get to see Izu talking to his classmates. Some secrets will be explained, while others will be revealed. Hope you look forward to it. Again, I apologize if this chapter wasn't very good. I'm doing my best to get back to writing again. Please be kind in the comments. As always, thank you everyone for your continued patience, comments, and support. Hope you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. And that's a wrap on chapter 51 of the one they call Broccoli. And by the way, Texiliaz, this is amazing! What do you mean, sorry if it's bad? This is like peak writing! Peak! You ate and left 0 crumbs. You and your little alter, and any other alter that happened to be helping you write this, or any other person. It's all amazing. It's so good. I love it so much. This was my first read through of this chapter. There were some parts that I had to try not to laugh to, and I might have repeated the line because, uh, because halfway through, someone DM'd me saying, "Hey, chapter 51 is posted," and I had to pause. I'm like, "Yep, already 11 minutes into recording it." It was so funny to me. Anyway, please go show the original author Texiliaz some love. Please leave me a comment. I love reading your comments. They make me so happy. Please leave me specifically hate comments, and I'll shout you in the next video. That being said, shoutouts to Daisy Firewolf, Daisy Firewolf, and Samson Tales. I'm assuming that first T is silent. So, that was chapter 51. I know some of y'all are concerned, like, that I'm not doing daily updates on Broccoli anymore. The reason for that is we're caught up! I'm updating as the author updates. So, whenever the author updates, the podfic for it will come out 10 a.m. afterwards. 10 a.m. CDT, that is, which is Central Daylight Time. So yeah, that's why you might not see Broccoli for a bit. It's because there's no more content for me to make a podfic of. And Texiliaz is... I'm not gonna pressure Texiliaz because writing takes time. I've learned this. I've started writing my own podfic. By the way, Texiliaz, I admire you so much because how do you write dialogue so freaking good? I suck at dialogue. I'm co-writing a fic, and both of us can't do dialogue. Like, how? How? I started treating it like a roleplay game. Is that the secret? Is that what you do? Anyway, sorry for my crash out. This was amazing. Loved it so much. Chapter 52 will be posted when Chapter 52 is updated by Texiliaz. All that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye, pups!